Aloha friends. Welcome to the Sunday morning devotional program sponsored by the Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of South DeKalb County and Sandy Springs, Georgia. So wonderful to have you all with us today. Across the globe, the teachings of the Baha'i faith, brought to us more than 150 years ago by His Holiness Baha'u'llah, its founder, whose name in Arabic means the glory of God, have inspired and continue to inspire individuals and communities as they strive to improve their own lives and contribute to the advancement of civilization. Baha'i beliefs address such essential themes as the oneness of God and religion, the oneness of humanity and freedom from all forms of prejudice, the inherent nobility of the human being, the progressive revelation of religious truth, a gradual unfolding of God's purpose with the appearance of each divine teacher, the development of spiritual qualities, which allows us to reflect the image of God that God made us in, the integration of worship and service, with work performed in the spirit of service being counted as worship in the eyes of God. The fundamental equality of the sexes, more widely evidenced in the setting of equal opportunity, the harmony between religion and science as an established fact, the centrality of justice in all human endeavor, the importance of education, particularly for children, and the dynamics of the relationships that bind together individuals, communities, and institutions as humanity advances towards its collective maturity. Again, welcome. We're pleased to have you all join us. We'll begin with opening devotions. Please mute yourself if you're not speaking and silence your electronic devices if you are speaking. Thank you. Gwen.
O Lord, thou art the remover of every anguish and the dispeller of every affliction. Thou art he who banisheth every sorrow and setteth free every slave and the redeemer of every soul. O Lord, grant deliverance through thy mercy and reckon me among such servants of thine as have gained salvation. The Bab.
Kathy.
O Lord, provide for the speedy growth of the tree of thy divine unity. Water it then, O Lord, with flowing waters of thy good pleasure, and cause it before the revelations of thy divine assurance to yield such fruits as thou desirest for thy glorification and exaltation, thy praise and thanksgiving, and to magnify thy name, to laud the oneness of thine essence, and to offer adoration unto thee, inasmuch as all this lieth within thy grasp, and in that of none other. Great is the blessedness of those whose blood thou hast chosen wherewith to water the tree of thine affirmation, and thus to exalt thy holy and immutable word. The Bab.
Susan.
Glorified art thou, O Lord my God. I beseech thee by him who is thy most great name, who hath been sorely afflicted by such of thy creatures as have repudiated thy truth, and who hath been hemmed in by sorrows which no tongue can describe, to grant that I may remember thee and celebrate thy praise in these days when all have turned away from thy beauty, have disputed with thee, have turned away disdainfully from him who is the revealer of thy cause. None is there, O my Lord, to help thee except thine own self, and no power to succor thee save thine own power. I entreat thee to enable me to cleave steadfastly to thy love and thy remembrance. This is verily within my power, and thou art the one that knoweth all that is in me. Thou in truth art knowing, apprised of all. Deprive me not, O my Lord, of the splendors of the light of thy face, whose brightness hath illuminated the whole world. No God is there beside thee, the most powerful, the all-glorious, the ever-forgiving. Baha'u'llah.
Dung
I have awakened in thy shelter, O my God, and it becomes him that seeks that shelter to abide within the sanctuary of thy protection and the stronghold of thy defense. Illumine my inner being, O my Lord, with the splendors of the dayspring of thy revelation, even as thou did emulate my outer being with the morning light of thy favor. Baha'u'llah.
Andrew.
Thou compassionate Lord, thou who art generous and able, we are servants of thine, sheltered beneath thy providence. Cast thy glance of favor upon us. Give light to our eyes, hearing to our ears, and understanding and love to our hearts. Render our souls joyous and happy through thy glad tidings. O Lord, point out to us the pathway of thy kingdom and resuscitate all of us through the breaths of the Holy Spirit. Bestow upon us life everlasting and confer upon us never-ending honor. Unify mankind and illumine the world of humanity. May we all follow thy pathway, long for thy good pleasure, and seek the mysteries of thy kingdom. O God, unite us and connect our hearts with thy indissoluble bond. Verily, thou art the giver, thou art the kind one, and thou art the Almighty. Abdul Baha.
Joan.
You're on mute.
Joan, can you do this one for us?
O my brother, hearken to the delightsome words of my honeyed tongue, and quaff the stream of mystic holiness from my sugar-threaded lips. Sow the seeds of my divine wisdom in the pure soil of thy heart, and water them with the water of certitude, that the hyacinths of my knowledge and wisdom may spring up fresh and green in the sacred city of thy heart. Baha'u'llah.
Bibi.
This is the day in which this is the day in which the testimony of the Lord had been fulfilled, the day in which the word of God had been made manifest and his evidence firmly established. His voice is calling you unto that which shall profit you, and enjoin it you to observe that which shall draw you nigh unto God, the Lord of Relation, Baha'u'llah, the Lord of Revelation, Baha'u'llah.
Shirley?
My object is none other than the betterment of the world and the tranquility of its peoples. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. This unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels which the pen of the Most High hath revealed are suffered to pass unheeded. Though through the power of the words he hath uttered, the whole of the human race can be illumined with the light of unity and the remembrance of his name, able to set on fire the hearts of all men and burn away the veils that intervene between them and his glory, Baha'u'llah.
I'll be right back.
Elizabeth?
Be thou not sad and dispirited on account of the opposition of the heedless ones. Soon they shall regret sorely. Reflect thou how the Pharisees persecuted and looked down in contempt upon his holiness, the Christ. The result was that his lamp became ignited, his light began to shine, and his followers sparkled like unto the stars from the horizon of existence. And the consequence to the Pharisees was the pangs of remorse and regret. Abdul Baha.
Thank you to all of today's readers. Next, we're going to listen to a healing prayer. If any of you wish to remember a loved one through the prayer for healing, please feel free to call out their name at this time.
Carla Smalls,
Erica Maston,
Elon Bowers,
David Guillory,
Trish,
Michael Courier,
Patty and Joyce,
Jim and Kathy Sigling,
Ron and his family,
Joel Smith,
art the all bountiful, the all knowing, the all wise. Thou verily art the all bountiful, the all knowing, the all wise. Thy name is my healing. Thy name is my healing, oh my God.
Now we're blessed to have a musical offering.
Zeba means the gate. It's our mixing. Zeba rocking classic on the beat. Means the gate. Standing ovation. Zeba means the gate. For the Bob. Zeba means the gate. One time, one time, one time. One time, one time, one time. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God, say praise be God. Here is God, all are His servants and all abide by His bidding. Says the Bible. One time, one time, one time. Let's celebrate the Bible today, today, today. Are you ready? He's the gate of God today, today, today. Let's celebrate the Bible today, today, today. He's the gate of God today, today, today. He came to prepare the way for the coming of Baha'i. The Bible gave all His life to bring about a new day of God. That is why I sing. Let's give Him standing ovation. He came with a special mission to give us a brand new vision for our unification. I said, let's give Him standing ovation. He came with a special mission to give us a brand new vision for our unification. One time, one time, one time. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God, oh, say praise be God, oh. He is God, oh. All are His servants and all abide by His bidding. Says the Bible. One time, one time, one time. Is there any remover of difficulties? Save God, oh, say praise be God, oh.
Friends, each week we're blessed to have a guest speaker share with us their insights on a particular topic. This week, we are honored to have with us Andrew Lefton. Andrew has been a Baha'i since 1974. During that time, he has served in a number of local spiritual assemblies as both chairperson and secretary. From 1997 to 2002, he served at the Baha'i World Center in Haifa, Israel, as coordinator of both the Office of Statistics and the Master Reference File, which are located at the seat of the Universal House of Justice. His last national service was at the Baha'i National Center, serving in the offices of Assembly Development and Education and Schools. He served most recently as secretary of the Chattanooga Baha'i Spiritual Assembly. Andrew is now retired, but previously held a project director's position at the University of Florida's Institute for Child Health Policy. Following this, he was director of the National Health Information Center, U.S. Public Health Service, Bethesda, Maryland, and as an IT quality assurance analyst variously assigned to various federal agencies, IT projects involving the NIH, USAID, DHS, and the FAA. Friends, please welcome Andrew Lefton.
Thank you, friends. I want to acknowledge and give my appreciation also to the Baha'is of South DeKalb and Sandy Springs for inviting me to participate today. I very much appreciate this opportunity. Stephen, I'm going to share my screen. I have some slides available, and let me just bring them up here. So am I all set to go on a share?
As far as I know, and Barbara can fix it if you're not.
Can you see this?
I see you started screen sharing, but I haven't seen the actual, there it goes. Now I can see it, yes.
You got it. Okay, good. Well, friends, I wanted to talk to you today a little bit about this notion of race and racism, both as illusion and as reality. This is, probably will take anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes to talk about. I've prepared a few slides here. Many of you are familiar with these concepts, but some of you may not be. I have a tendency to approach things from a historical perspective. And I also talk a little bit about the physical world and how it relates to the spiritual world. So that's the way we're going to go at this today. So let me see if I can, there we go. And let me know if any of you are having any problems to see in terms of seeing this. So today, what I'd like to accomplish in this short amount of time that we have is basically to talk about how the Baha'i faith approaches this notion of changing illusion into reality, especially when it comes to the relations between the races, and to further gain an understanding about the material and spiritual aspects of humankind, that they're basically two sides of the same coin, that humans are really composed of both of these realities. Historically, though, a lot of time has been spent in dealing with the material aspects of reality historically. We've been very concerned with security, our own security, the security of our species, the security of our societies. And now, with the advent of the Baha'i faith, we are coming into a new reality that is discussing this other aspect of human life, and that has to do with the spiritual reality that really undergirds or underlies all of our spiritual aspects and also material aspects of life. In terms of illusions on the historical side, oh, and by the way, I wanted to just mention, if you have any questions, why don't you make a note of them, and then we'll get to them at the end of this talk. We have about 20 slides to go through, but it shouldn't take too long. And then we can talk a little bit about this, or maybe clarify some things that you may not be clear about in terms of my talking.
Andrew, they can put it on chat at the bottom of their screen.
Thank you, Joan. Yeah, you can do that too, and I'll check the chat screen at the end just to see, where I may be able to clarify something based on what I've said. So here I'm really talking about, from a society's point of view, those things that drive negative social perceptions, which obviously racism or race is a very, very large area that occupies not only the history of this country, but many countries in the world. We have a tendency, because we live in our society, to think that, well, this is primarily an American problem, and it is a major problem in this country. But it also exists in many, many other parts of the world between different competing groups. And here I'm showing that in the beginning of history, there was always this competition for resources. And another driver was fear of others, fear of not surviving, fear of suffering, not having enough. But mostly the component that's common to all of this is fear. And a lot of fear, of course, is driven by ignorance, things that we don't understand or haven't been educated about. We also have an illusion that humankind, at least historically, is only a material creation, that we can only understand what we can see and feel and touch and measure. And this has been termed in the Baha'i faith and in other areas too in philosophy, the materialist approach. It is that reality is all that is real. It is all that we can measure. And so my question, as I began to study the Baha'i faith and learn about these different perceptions and reality itself, is can we unlearn these fears and perceptions? And if we learn something false, can we unlearn it? I mean, obviously the question is yes, if we pay attention to these things and spend time trying to understand what it was that it was driving these initial concerns of ours, and finding that they are in themselves illusions. There's a concept in the world which is called zero-sum gaming, and it basically says that we have a limited amount of resources, and if we add more people to it, there's only going to be less for us. And the reality is that it's really a non-zero-sum game. What we actually end up doing is by bringing human potential and expanding human potential, and all that other cultures and all that other individuals can bring to it really enlarges the pie and helps us to really thrive as we exist in the world. Another thing that I've learned over time is that action follows definition. So I wanted to just note here what the definition of illusion is, as a deceptive appearance or impression that we have. And what reality is the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. That going back to what I said originally, all we can see or hear or touch, that's our reality. But what we don't understand is there's another reality that drives our reality, the things that we experience in this material world. And so through this understanding, we actually become our words and our thoughts, which translate into our actions, okay? Now, this is a little bit of a departure in terms of learning and fear. But this is a song that I had been familiar with from the Rodgers and Hammerstein Broadway production of South Pacific. And this was done originally in 1949. And I wanted to read these words to you because to me, they hold special meaning. And basically it says this: you've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are oddly made and people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You've got to be carefully taught. Now, I've included, this is again a bit of a departure, but about this song. This song from the show South Pacific is preceded by one of the characters in the play production who says that racism is not born in you, it happens after you're born. And the lyricist and the composer, Rodgers and Hammerstein of South Pacific, was challenged on several levels when they first brought this to Broadway, and then they toured around the country. And there were some legislative challenges to its decency. And at the time, of course, we were going through the Red Scare, And it was considered to be a communist agenda that they were proposing in this song. So you'll note here, Georgia's mentioned, but it happened in other states as well. And I'm going to read this. While the show was on a tour of the southern United States, lawmakers in Georgia introduced a bill outlawing entertainment containing an underlying philosophy inspired by Moscow. And that's a quote. One legislator said that a song justifying interracial marriage was implicitly a threat to the American way of life. Rogers and Hammerstein defended their work strongly, and the author, James Michener, recalled that the authors stubbornly said that this song was going to stay in the play, even if it meant that the production was going to fail. So they were strongly attached to the presentation that they were making in this song, that racism, which is actually the theme throughout the entire South Pacific play, because if any of you have any familiarity with that play, you'll know that the female lead in the play and the male lead fall in love. And only later in the play does she realize, not he, but she realizes that he comes from a mixed background. And so it takes her departure of him. So it really doesn't have a very happy ending, but it makes a point. Now, on to Baha'i teachings about reality. My experience in the Baha'i faith is really very consonant with what's been happening in the physical sciences, especially cosmology, that our creation began as a unified whole. In other words, you've all probably heard of the Big Bang Theory. It would be very rare for somebody not to have heard that term. But that concept that creation started from what they called a singularity, a very small substance that was even beyond viewing. It was so small, but it had so much material and matter and energy built into it that it rapidly expanded into what is now our universe. And so everything that we are in terms of human beings emerged from that reality. Matter of fact, everything around us, our whole material creation, this world and the universe, came out of a unified expansion. And so we imagine as human beings, maybe not all of us, but some of us, that we're somehow separate from creation because we walk upon the earth. We can fly above it. We can even fly into outer space. And so I imagine some of us imagine that we're sort of separate from this creation, which really leads to some unfortunate consequences because we have become, in my view, not good shepherds of our own creation and our own earth. And so there's all kinds of implications that come out of that. So again, just to reiterate a bit, what we cannot see or measure really is the subtle reality of our existence. This is a Baha'i point of view. And that our minds and our souls are that stuff of that subtle reality. In the Baha'i teachings, it talks about the fact that the soul is reflected in the human body. It's not part of the human body. And it's reflected through the mind. Again, something that can't be measured. What can be measured is the functions of the human brain, which is material. It's made of a material substance, as are we all. But there's an aspect of humanity that has to do with our soul and our mind. And these are really the basic elements of Baha'i teaching, because those elements of our soul are what we are asked to develop as we are born into this world. Okay? And the whole teaching aspect, being ignorant about something or learning something that isn't correct, such as the notion of racism, which we're going to get into, is something that we learn at our parents' knees or in the culture that we belong to or in our peer groups. And so the Baha'i faith speaks directly to this relationship between the material, how we exist, and who we exist with, and the spiritual. And that material distinctions are part of this illusion. We look at another person who doesn't look like us in some way, shape, or form, and we say they are different. But that difference is only apparent. It's only what we see. the essential distinctions, what's under the skin, the soul and the mind and the capacity and the capability of individuals are not part of that distinction. There's a connection there between all of us. You know, we all hear in life that if you do something to somebody else that's not good, there's this karma or this wheel in life that goes around, and what goes around comes around. And I think that there's a reason for that. It may not happen right away, but it may happen at some point in time that if you do an injustice to somebody, it's going to have a rebound effect on you. So what I'm talking about here is that ultimately what's essential is our spiritual natures. This underlying reality we can't measure, but which we feel. Many of us have this intuitive sense that there is this underdeveloped sense of ourself, which is our spiritual reality. And that humankind, according to the Baha'i teachings, are now embarking upon its stage of maturity. In other words, historically, when what we call manifestations of God, which are, in our case, our prophet founder Baha'u'llah, but we also consider Muhammad and Buddha and Jesus and Moses and others to be manifestations of God. In other words, God talks to this life, to our material life, through these manifestations. And it's those teachings that then help society to progress so that when it gets to a different stage in life, God speaks to humankind again and brings with it new teachings for a new age. That's what the Baha'i faith really is all about. And so what's essential to behavioral change are first principles. You know, if you go back to Moses and the 10 Commandments, those are first principles. This is basically something that is self-evident to us if we really think about it. If in the 10 Commandments it says, thou shalt not steal, or thou shalt not covet the property of another, these are self-evident. You don't need some kind of an underlying theory to prove them. It just feels right to us. And these first principles or axioms are the basis of the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah brought a whole new set of living codes to help us live a better life. Now, talking about race, excuse me. So 2 points here. Skin color is not a true representation of the underlying reality of humans, which I mentioned before, and that race is an invented construct, which allows one group to dominate another, and it puts up barriers to the growth and development of all human beings. It even oppresses the people that are doing it, because if they continue to do it, it just creates in them these barriers to their own growth and development. So here, is there anybody out there that would, Stephen, that maybe we could get somebody to read this quote rather than me talking all the time? Would somebody care to read this?
I can read it if anyone else wants to.
Thank you, Stephen.
Race is a human-invented shorthand term used to describe and categorize people into various social groups based on characteristics like skin color, physical features, and genetic heredity. Race, while not a valid biological concept, is a real social construction that gives or denies benefits and privileges. American society developed the notion of race early in its formation to justify its new economic system of capitalism, which depended on the institution of forced labor, especially the enslavement of African peoples.
Thank you, Stephen. This is a quote that I took from the Smithsonian Institution in one of its writings. So now moving from that concept to the Baha'i faith, I'm going to touch a little bit about that history for those that may be watching that are not quite as familiar with it. So in the Baha'i faith, there is the concept known as the Greater Covenant of God. Now, if you see below, covenant is considered a contract of a formal, solemn, or binding agreement. And the Greater Covenant of God basically says humankind through its entire history, past, present, and future, will never be left alone when it comes to God's guidance. So in the Baha'i faith, there's this notion of progressive revelation. That means that Revelation is in itself a historical process. Starting in prehistory and moving up to the present through the 19th century with the Baha'i founding of the Baha'i faith, and then into the future, because the Baha'is themselves know that there's a cyclical aspect to history. In other words, things arise, like in the spring, and then they go through a maturing period, a growth and maturing period, like summer and fall, where they begin to decline, and then to the winter of its existence, when it loses its energy and a new system takes over. And the Baha'is are very much believers in that process, so that we know in our own faith that after some 1,000 years of existence, another manifestation will come to guide humankind. So the founder of the faith, Baha'u'llah, provides us with a new revival of religious teachings by reaffirming all of past religions. It reaffirms the teachings of Jesus and Muhammad and all those that came after, and then brings a new set of teachings for this age, according to the maturity of humankind at this age, at this stage, and brings us new spiritual insights and social teachings. The primary concept of the faith is that there are three unifying concepts that tie it all together. The unity of religion, of God, and of humankind. We all worship God, but we do it in a slightly different way, which are primarily based on where we were born and what we believe and what affected us or influenced us. And so cultural norms become an aspect of this. But underlying all of this, we all worship the same God. Religion basically, except in its essential qualities, not in its cultural aspects, but in its essential qualities, is the same. And humankind, in its essential qualities, are the same. So why the differences? So in 1912, Baha'u'llah had a son, and his name was Abdul-Baha, and he became a leader of the faith after his father died in 1892. So he came to America in 1912 and stayed for 239 days, both in the United States and in Canada. And here, in a public talk he gave at Howard University in Washington, D.C. in 1912, he stated the following: "All colors are one, and that is the color of servitude to God." He went on to say that skin color was of no importance before God except as an adornment and a source of charm. It's something we should celebrate. Only among humans, he emphasized, had skin color become a cause of discord. And during this visit, in the various venues he spoke in through the US and Canada, now mind you, he was in his 70s when he was doing this, he said that differences of race were not only natural, but laudable and to be celebrated. And he went on to say that difference of race and color is like the variegated beauty of flowers in a garden. If you enter a garden, you will see yellow, white, blue, red flowers in profusion and beauty, each radiant within itself, and although different from the others, lending its own charm to them. That racial difference in the human kingdom is similar. If all the flowers, he said racial difference in the human kingdom is similar. If all the flowers in a garden were of the same color, the effect would be monotonous and wearying to the eye. In other words, if all we saw were white flowers or red flowers or blue flowers, it wouldn't be very interesting after a while. Now, this is a little bit of a digression about about racism, race being a social, not a biological construct. In Washington, D.C., at the time of his visit, the Baha'i community was separated into two different communities, one white and one black, according to the times, with a belief at the times that it was separate but equal, supposedly. What he said was not going to happen. And so to demonstrate it, I mean, he demonstrated it a number of ways, but one primarily was he brought these two individuals together that you see here, Louis Gregory and Louisa Matthews. Louis was an attorney. Louisa Matthews had been in the Holy Land with Abdu'l-Baha and had actually traveled over with him to the United States at the time when he came back. Now, because of the situation in Washington being as difficult as it was, they couldn't get married in Washington. They couldn't find anybody to wed them, so they had to go to New York City to be married. But nevertheless, they got married and came back to Washington. So this was a visible demonstration of Abdu'l-Baha practicing the Baha'i faith and demonstrating it to other Baha'is, saying, this is the reality for the future. Whites and blacks will be working together, living together, and loving each other. And another aspect is that race, that society says what race is, not biology. In the spiritual realm, only the soul and a good character count. Now, from here, how do we talk about transforming this? Again, using the Baha'i faith as an example. But there are other good examples out there. That's not to say this is exclusive with Baha'is, but Baha'is, as a first principle of their faith, when they join the community of Baha'is, affirm the fact that we believe this. We may not live it properly. We may not even understand how to do it properly. I mean, I have to talk about my own experience. You know, I grew up in Chicago, and I worked with many Black individuals during the course of my working life there. But at the end of the day, I went my way, they went their way, and we never came together. And so when I became a Baha'i in 1974, the reality slowly started to work on me of, well, why was I not demonstrating in my own life what I believed as a Baha'i? Not just by my words, but by my actions. And so here, I'm trying to say, or the Baha'i faith is saying this, that the Baha'i writings state that to truly investigate truth, we must abandon our prejudices. And that since the essential truth underlying reality is one, independent investigation of truth will also be a powerful force towards establishing the oneness of humanity. And that justice equally, when broadly and fairly applied, is also vital. And that this is a crucial step in bringing the kingdom of God to this earth. And here again, I've always put a little definition in here so people will know what I'm talking about when I talk about words like essential or the other things that I had referred to previously. So just for a second, we're going to talk a little bit about the kingdom of God. So in Baha'u'llah's writings, he wrote a book called the Book of Certitude, where he attempted to answer for a religious cleric of the time, who happened to be Muslim, what he was talking about in terms of what the kingdom of God is not and what it is. So again, Stephen, could we ask somebody maybe to read this quote? There'll be this quote and one following it.
Is there anyone who would like to read this one?
Susan?
And now ponder this in thy heart. Were sovereignty to mean earthly sovereignty and worldly dominion, were it to imply the subjection and eternal allegiance of all the peoples and kindred of the earth, whereby his loved ones should be exalted and be made to live in peace, and his enemies be abased and tormented, such form of sovereignty would not be true of God himself, the source of all dominion, whose majesty and power all things testify.
Thank you, Bibi. So what's he saying here? Well, in plain words, he's saying, okay, if the kingdom of God comes to us and it exalts one body of believers to the exclusion of other body of believers, that's not what he means by the kingdom of God. It's supposed to benefit everybody, not just a select group. So what he says is this is the Baha'i view of the kingdom. I'll read this one, Stephen. And yet is not the object of every revelation to effect a transformation in the whole character of mankind, a transformation that shall manifest itself both outwardly and inwardly, that shall affect both its inner life and external conditions. And he's asking the question, as a question, should it not affect both, inner and outer? For the character of mankind be not changed, the futility of God's universal manifestation would be apparent. So what he's saying here is that when Jesus comes or Muhammad comes or Baha'u'llah comes, if the power of God through the revelation and the words that are revealed can't affect a change in the hearts of humankind, then it's futile. Whatever a manifestation of God does makes no sense because there are no fruits of that tree. Society just doesn't change. So, one aspect of Baha'i teachings is independent investigation of truth. These are all stepping stones on the way to moving from illusion to reality. So every individual member of humankind is exhorted and commanded to set aside superstitious beliefs, traditions, and blind imitation of ancestral forms in religion, and investigate reality for himself. Inasmuch as the fundamental reality is one, all religions and nations of the world will become one through investigation of reality. And I put a little phrase, a little sentence at the bottom, basically saying that one in this case doesn't mean sameness. I know some people think of unity and oneness, and they think, oh yeah, everybody has to be the same. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about a way in which we can be united in finding truth and in applying it, okay? So in addition to this, we want to talk in the faith a little bit about justice here. And Stephen, again, could somebody read this particular quote?
Do you have anyone who'd like to?
Sure, I can read that one.
Great.
At the individual level, justice is that faculty of the human soul that enables each person to distinguish truth from falsehood. In the sight of God, Baha'u'llah avers, justice is the best beloved of all things, since it permits each individual to see with his own eyes rather than the eyes of others, to know through his own knowledge rather than the knowledge of his neighbor or his group. It calls for fair-mindedness in one's judgments, for equality in one's treatment of others, and is thus a constant, if demanding, companion in the daily occasions of life.
So all of us, and certainly including me, could take this phrase, this quotation, and paste it on our medicine cabinets and study it every day. Because here he's basically saying this is very demanding. I mean, to act at this level of integrity for yourself, for being fair to yourself, being just to yourself, and being just to others. And we almost have to remind ourselves every day that this is what's being asked of us, certainly as members of the Baha'i community, so that there's no hypocrisy in what we do and what we say. There has to be this connection between our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And we'll come back to this a little bit later. Almost done now, Stephen. So here we're going to talk a little bit about these twin realities, and I have just a little thing from the physical realm to talk about at the bottom. So the Baha'i writings affirm that the twin realities are but an expression of a single system, one physical and the other metaphysical. So they interact with each other. This is a Baha'i belief. This Baha'i concept of a purposeful complementary relationship affirms that each perspective helps explain the other. The spiritual world is like unto the phenomenal world, our world. They are the exact counterpart of each other. Whatever objects appear in this world of existence are the outer pictures of the world of heaven. You know, it was interesting. You probably all remember the Greek philosopher Plato. He wrote a piece in his writings, or what was recorded as what he talked about, called The Cave. And in the cave, he has these people chained so that they can only see in one direction, and they look at a wall in the cave, and behind them there are fires going, or there's a fire going. And the fire, much like a slide projector, is projecting elements of things that go in front of it, so that all the people in the cave can see are the images dancing on the wall. And that to them is their reality. In effect, what Plato was saying is what we're experiencing today. What we see here, we think of as our reality, but it's really a shadow realm. It's it's a reflection of what underlies this reality that we can't have direct knowledge of. That's why we have the manifestations of God telling us, explaining to us what is that reality. And through the growth of our spirit, of our soul in life, through tests and trials, we get to know this. And so the counterpart relationship does not mean that these two dimensions of life are co-equal. That reality and this one, the purpose of the physical dimension is to provide us with sense expressions, sensible expressions, things we can experience. The purpose of the spiritual reality is to undergird that and to give us only what's good in life. The things that we hear in life that are bad or horrible, that's all comes from human free will. That doesn't come from God. And one other thing I wanted to point to, and I know this image at the bottom bottom right is very small about perception, but you see those two colored lines in the middle or almost middle of that range of numbers. Well, that middle area represents what humans can perceive in sight, in vision, what we can see. The rest of that is the whole electromagnetic spectrum, what we can't see, but what affects us. I'm using that as an analogy for what surrounds us as far as the spiritual realm is concerned. So going on from here, I just wanted to kind of tie this all together for all of us. So underlying reality or above reality is the metaphysical or spiritual realm, the kingdom of God. Between that realm and this realm is the manifestation of God. That individual who is selected by God to reveal further truths to humankind through revelation and inspiration. And our realm, which is the material realm, we react to all of those others, the manifestation and the kingdom of God through prayer, service, and the development of our souls. So, Stephen, I'm going to stop at this point. I wanted to before I go back to the questions, I wanted to go back just to this final thought, which are that your actions define your character, your words define your wisdom. Your words define your wisdom, but your treatment of others defines the real you. And that's an ethicist named Mayur Ramgur who made that quote. Now let me see if I can get back to this prior. I don't know if I can get back here. I think I went too far, Stephen. Anyway, let me stop here without trying to go back. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions they'd like to ask me now about this particular piece that I shared with you?
I have some observations in my personal life that you seem to have captured in your graph of the electromagnetic spectrum, and our physical reality is defined by a very narrow segment. I'll very briefly mention three things. We used to live in Kentucky, and I was familiar with Lexington, Kentucky, and I was on my way to Georgia to see my family who were in Athens. And as I drove through Lexington, I suddenly became very unsettled, as if something was very wrong. And I had no concept of what it could be. And when I got out of Lexington and continued on down to Athens, Georgia, when I got there, I learned the reality. And that was that my daughter-in-law had died in an accident very close to where I drove through. Mm. Another thing that happened, and this is weird, people might think I'm crazy about it, but I was with a prayer group at the Unity Center here in South DeKalb. And when we got together for our work sessions and so on, we would say prayers before we went out to do physical work. And it came time for prayer for the departed. So I said the prayer for the departed. And all of a sudden, my vision, I was still seeing that I was in the room, but my full attention was directed at a smiling face of a fraternity brother who had died the previous year. A beautiful smile on his face. And the third thing, I'll get through this quickly. We had a good friend who was dying of leukemia in Frankfort, Kentucky, and we had a meeting at our house saying prayers and for his healing. But at that meeting, I said, I don't know if I said it openly, I said, whatever God you decree, I will accept. Well, nothing happened right away, but the next day, I had a vision of my father, who was deceased, standing behind me when I made that comment. And he was so relaxed and happy. Those are my three things. And I think I got outside the little band in the electromagnetic spectrum.
Thank you, Mr. Wiley. Thank you. Anybody else have any observations or thoughts they want to share before I turn this back to Stephen and your communities?
Well, I apologize, it's not really a question, but I wanted to keep going with your reference back to Plato and the cave, because as I'm sure you know, when Plato goes further in there, he talks about how one of these prisoners is set free, goes out and sees the light of the sun and the way things really are. All the other prisoners still think what they see on the wall of the cave is all that is real, but now this one person knows. And then they come back and they try to convince the other prisoners of the reality of this. But of course, these prisoners never seen anything but the shadows on the wall. And worse yet, this person who's been outside, his eyes got used to the light. He can't see as well in the darkness as he used to. And so the other prisoners say, you can't even see things as clearly as we see them. Why should we believe you? You know? And so there's this irony that the very fact that he has seen the truth makes it harder for people to accept what he says. And I think we've seen this over and over in the question of race, where, you know, people who recognize that this thing is something we created, have been looked at as idiots almost, or you know, naive fools or communists. Is that one? That was a new one for me. But I think it is a revealing aspect of that sort of that allegory, you know.
Well, Stephen, thank you. That's a wonderful coda to that whole story or the presentation. I really, you've done very well. Thank you for underlining that aspect of it. Anybody else have a thought they want to share? Otherwise, Stephen, I thank you all again for inviting me. I appreciate it greatly. And I turn it back to you then, Stephen.
All right. Are we sure there are no more questions? All right. Well, in that case, at this point, we'd like to welcome all of our guests to the Baha'i Unity Center's Sunday morning devotional program. Please feel free to share who you are, where you're from, and how you happen to be with us today. I know there are a few of you here who we haven't seen before. This includes Baha'is visiting from out of town and sojourners recently returned to the area. We'd love to hear from all of you. So is there anyone who would like to introduce themselves?
Well, I can start. I'm wife to Andrew, even though we have different last names. And we are in the last few days of residing in the Chattanooga area. We've been here for 5 years and loved every moment of it. This is a wonderful community that we are going to miss greatly. Like so many people, who have endured this year and a half, going on 2 years of COVID, we realized how important it is to be near family as much as we love our friends. And so we are relocating to the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, where we each have children. He's got a wonderful son that and wife up there, and I have a daughter and her family and my grandson. So like Andrew, I've been a Baha'i over 40 years, and it's wonderful to recognize a few people on the call today that I have met in other times in my life. So it's I love that we're still sort of a small community, even though we all want it to grow. It's still very nice to recognize people that you've worked with or had been in a community with. So my greetings to those that I have known, and also to those that I'm meeting for the first time. Nice to be with you today.
Thank you, Susan. Anyone else would like to introduce themselves?
I'm Joan McGovern from Hickson, Tennessee, and I'm in the same community as Susan and Andrew. I am a big fan of theirs. I've attended many of their classes, Andrew's classes especially, and learned a lot from him since they've been here in our community. I also have lived in the Atlanta community and recognized some friends from that area. It's a wonderful thing to be able to get together via computer to see people you haven't seen in a while. And I'm very appreciative that I had the chance to join you today.
We're happy you could join us too. I do think that you're right. The word silver lining almost seems too positive, but let's call it that. The silver lining of everything that's happened in the last year and a half has been, or one of them has been, that we realized how much we can connect to one another, even when we can't be together face to face. And I think that's something we really have learned. I hope we don't forget it when this is over. So, anyone else?
Yeah, we've become a regular with this Sunday morning. I'm Gwen, and this is Ernest. And we recently moved a few months back from Southern California. And with all the fires going on, we're grateful that we're here. Even though it's Northern California, when we lived there were fires around us, and we oftentimes would wake up with sore throats because of all the smoke. So it's a blessing and we pray constantly for the dear friends there that are suffering. Anyway, we moved to the Georgia area to serve Baha'u'llah. We actually don't have any family around here. We kind of moved away from them, and it's been challenging. And dear Joan, you radiant soul, she lived in Carrollton where we now live, and has planted many seeds. And you can just kind of feel that she has done a good job of that. We hope that we can serve Baha'u'llah a little better as COVID gets lifted a little bit, because being in our 70s, we don't go very many places. So this is part of our enrichment to come to the Sunday mornings with all you dear, devoted, lovely, sweet people. And Andrew, it was a joy to listen to your succinct understanding of racism. And Ernest and I, we look forward to Sunday, because it's our time to be together with family. And thank God for Zoom, because if I had to drive and see all of you, I wouldn't do it. So now we know why Zoom was created. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Gwen, for that lovely comment. I really appreciate your words. I always, when I talk about race and racism, I think to myself, well, here's this old gray-haired white guy talking about race, and I think, what am I doing? And, but I just keep plugging away. I'm hoping that maybe another old white guy will, pick up on it and start to talk about it also.
Well, it's a joy to hear old white guys and young white guys and whatever talk about racism because, because.
Because.
Yeah, because it's time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Ernest from was born in the Caribbean, St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands, and my parents moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and from there I left the southern states at an early age as a teenager and went to California and retired from that at the medical examiner's office, and I haven't experienced a lot of racism, but you know what? It's not as bad as we look. It's getting better. It's just a few pockets of that, because in my country where I was born at, you never saw nothing like that. We made our money off the tourism. We dive down in the ocean, in the sea to get these black sea corals and make beads for the people, the tourists that would come and sell them. And, we, after 55 years living in the West in Southern California, we moved back here, and it's like all foreign country to me because I was a kid when I left here and went back. But it's a pleasure on Sunday mornings to hear everybody's just different speakers, and I really enjoyed it. And I thank you very much for allowing Gwen and I to be a part of it.
Yes, thank you.
Stephen,
Huh?
may I introduce myself?
That'd be great.
Hi, everyone. Aloha. I'm Elizabeth Bowers, as some of you know. 18 years ago, I was a part of the South DeKalb community, but we moved to Ackworth, Georgia, where the Baha'is are few and far between. But I do get my own inspiration from the Sunday Zoom broadcast to see all of you lovely people, some of whom I knew long ago and probably don't remember me now that I'm in my 70s. I don't look the same. But as far as the Andrew, your talk was wonderful and inspiring. I do feel, however, a little differently from Ernest. As a Black person, having grown up in a white community as a child, I didn't understand what it was. I used to think, oh, they don't like me because there's something wrong with me. But I didn't really understand the whole concept of racism until I grew up. It wasn't taught in my school. There were no references to Blacks, other than the happy slaves and whatnot. So and my parents didn't mention it, which maybe they didn't want to because they didn't want us to have hard hearts. But anyway, I did feel the wrath of racism as I plowed through my life, but I never allowed it to affect my thinking. I learned who I am, and I have always thought people rather silly for hating me just because God made me a certain color. It never made sense to me, and it still doesn't. I see it as a mean for the rich to get richer. You can't get rich unless you have that population under you who will work and earn the money for you. In other words, but do the actual work. So it's really a matter of the rich holding the power over the poor, not just Blacks, but anybody who they can get to do their work. And when I think about the billionaires and the trillionaires now too, what about those people who got them there? Why aren't they allowed to benefit monetarily from all that good? So one day the world will hear the cry of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha and will put aside their racial differences and understand that we are one in the power and mighty spirit of Almighty God. So thank you, and everyone have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week.
Dear Elizabeth, I sent you a chat message and I wish you would take a look at it. Thank you.
I will. I've been in the hospital, so I really have to catch up on things. I just got out, I guess Saturday.
Yes.
So I'm still in recovery mode.
You're looking wonderful.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Stephen, can I say just a brief word here at this juncture, just for a minute? Listening to what Elizabeth was saying, of course, I always think of that song about times they are a-changing, and I think, I don't think that, we're going to be looking backwards much longer. I think that it's enough people have caught on fire about this issue that it's going to be moving forward. I firmly believe that. So, Elizabeth, I haven't walked in your shoes, but a lot of years of the sharp edges being rubbed off of me, I feel that I'm finally starting to understand a bit,
Thank you for that.
You bet.
I appreciate it.
I'm going to quickly introduce myself. I'm Stephen Boynton's wife. Grew up in China, came to US in 2001. I think before that, I really had no concept of race. I guess because in China, I did not have that concept. I just want to share that became a Baha'i in 2019, 2016, I forgot. Okay, but anyway, I just want to share that I think my experience in the US is I fall in love with this Baha'i community. No matter, like I lived in Virginia, New York, Atlanta, like even in China, Chengdu, no matter where I stayed, the Baha'i community, no matter even we know each other, like all of you, somehow I just had this sense of safety, this sense of I know I will be accepted, I know I will be appreciated and loved, and just for who I am. I know my skin color will not be an issue. And that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling. Sometimes, like, I wonder, we talk about learn and unlearn. I think the Baha'i teaching, if we just keep, sharing the faith, sharing the Baha'i teaching, and that gives us hope, that dual reality. It's possible we can have more and more people join us. It's possible we can just see people as who they are and have this kind of strong validation and security. I know I will be loved and accepted, regardless they know me or not. Okay, so I just want to share my experience with that. And actually, I think that gives me hope. Okay. And I shared one time before, my field is positive psychology, and I will incorporate some of the Baha'i teaching in my teaching. So thank you very much for a very powerful talk. So yeah.
Stephen,
Yes.
I hope the Atlanta community, the South DeKalb community that puts this program on, features people like your wife and lets us hear their stories. I think that's a very powerful tool. And it supports those of us that have been Baha'is for a long time. It gives us energy to keep going and keep teaching and keep trying. And for new Baha'is, it shows them there is a new path, a new way of doing things. And for anyone who is really into race relations, as I have been for years and years, I tune in every Friday night to the Baha'is of Clearwater, Florida. And they put on an interracial, this is not just Baha'is, the people there that are not Baha'is. And so it's an faith interracial discussion on race every Friday night. And it's put on by Steve Zaludik, who used to live in the Atlanta community, was brought up in the Atlanta community, and is a lawyer now in the Tampa area. And it's worth tuning in because we really wrestle with these problems and the pain that we hear in the Black community, and how we can get beyond that. So for anyone that wants to find this group, if they'll contact me, I'll put you in touch with them.
She is Chattanooga.
Thank you very much. Now with that, I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring us to a close. But before we do, let me make a few announcements. So today's program has been recorded and posted to the YouTube channel entitled South DeKalb Baha'i Unity Center, where you can view it and invite others to view it as well. And for members of the Baha'i faith, you are warmly encouraged to make a financial contribution to the South DeKalb Baha'i Fund, the Sandy Springs Baha'i Fund, and the National Baha'i Fund through the online contribution system at ocs.baha'i.us, or to mail a check to the Baha'i Unity Center at 2370 Wesley Chapel Road, Decatur, Georgia, 30035. I want to give many thanks to everyone who worked together to make today's program possible. That includes our speaker, our volunteer readers, Barbara Hennix, who keeps everything going forward and without whom we wouldn't have this gathering every Sunday, and the spiritual assemblies of the Baha'is of South DeKalb and Sandy Springs. And thank you to everyone for being here today. I'm Stephen Boyanton. Until next time, be safe, be well, and we'll end now with a closing prayer for the departed. Barbara, are we able to get that one on screen?
Yes, just give me a second. I just got back. I stepped away.
I don't know about everyone else, but I can't see the letters on
Oh,
here.
okay. Let me try that again. Sorry.
That's much better. Is there anyone who would like to read for us now? All right, if not, then I will take the privilege for myself this time. Glory be to thee, O Lord my God. Abase not him whom thou hast exalted through the power of thine everlasting sovereignty, and remove not far from thee him whom thou hast caused into the tabernacle of thine eternity. Wilt thou cast away, O my God, him whom thou hast overshadowed with thy lordship? Wilt thou turn away from thee, O my desire, him to whom thou hast been a refuge? Canst thou degrade him whom thou hast uplifted, or forget him whom thou hast enabled to remember thee? Glorified, immensely glorified art thou. Thou art he who from everlasting hath been king of the entire creation and its prime mover, and thou wilt to everlasting remain the Lord of all created things and their ordainer. Glorified art thou, O God, O my God. If thou ceasest to be merciful unto thy servants, who then will show mercy unto them? And if thou refusest to succor thy loved ones, who is it that can succor them? Glorified, immensely glorified art thou. Thou art adored in thy truth, and thee do we all verily worship. And thou art manifest in thy justice, and to thee do we all verily bear witness. Thou art in truth, beloved in thy grace. No God is there but thee, the help in peril, the self-subsisting. Thank you, everyone. Alawapa.
Okay.
Good luck with your move, Susan, and
Allahu Akbar.